Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. Thank you all for joining us. We have a great session lined up for you today. We will be covering everything your hotel needs to know about the end of Universal Analytics and how to make a successful transition to Google Analytics 4. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce today's subject matter experts on today's topic. Perfect. First, we have Luke Markeski, who is the Senior Vice President of Global E-Commerce at Sendyne. Luke is a digital strategy and delivery expert with a passion for solving complex marketing, product, and technology challenges, the hospitality, travel, and leisure sectors. Then we have Gil Christenberry, who is a former member of the Sendyne family. He was with us for 3 years as the head of our content team, and he now serves as the head of content at Calibrate Analytics. So thank you both for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Before we get started, just a few housekeeping details for all attendees. This webinar is being recorded, and all registrants will receive a link to the recording via email, typically within 24 hours after the webinar ends. All attendees are also on mute, so if you'd like to ask a question during the webinar, please use the questions module on the right-hand side of your screen. Your questions and comments are only seen by myself and today's presenters, and we have reserved some time at the end of the webinar to run through them. Following the webinar, if you'd like to access any more learning opportunities, feel free to check out the Sendyne Resource Library on sendyne.com. And I will now hand it over to Luke.
Thanks, Grace. Welcome, everybody. We thought we'd begin today and talking about Google Analytics 4 with a snapshot of the timeline. And what's not pictured here is the release of Universal Analytics, which was in October of 2012. So we're talking about a transition of a platform from a relatively stable place over 10 years and in a new world that our marketers are going to be going through. So with that in mind, I'll just talk about a few key dates. Google announced the release of GA4 in October of 2020, and then subsequently released the notice that Universal Analytics would be sunset in March of 2022. And that fast forwards us through to just about today and two really important dates to keep in mind as we go through this presentation. The first is June 30th of this year. At that point in time, your Universal Analytics data will stop processing, or another way to say that, will stop capturing data for Universal Analytics, and you'll need to have your website tagged with GA4. And then importantly, on July 1st of next year, access to your Universal Analytics data will cease. You'll no longer be able to access that from your UA platform. So with those key dates in mind, I'm going to turn it over to Gil now to take us through a little bit more detail on what GA4 is.
Thanks, Luke. Hi, everyone. So first, what is Google Analytics 4? GA4 is the latest marketing measurement platform from Google. Its predecessor, as Luke mentioned, was Universal Analytics, also called GA3, which relied heavily on cookies to track user behavior. And since cookies have fallen out of favor due to evolving consumer data protections, the new platform changes the way that Google tracks user data. So the changes make the platform more privacy forward to both adhere to existing privacy regulations, but also anticipate future privacy laws. And these shifts result in a dramatic change in how the platform works and how marketers interpret the data. So you won't be looking at hits and page views and other metrics that have long been familiar to marketers. Instead, GA4 focuses on user engagement by using what they call events to track user behavior, and users can choose any action to be an event, and then orient measurement around the entire user journey rather than just individual campaigns. Next slide, please. So GA4 offers a range of advantages over its predecessor, from usability improvements to new technology that powers even deeper insights. And it comes at an exciting time for hoteliers, what we call the age of data democratization. So because GA4 is a new kind of analytics tool designed for the future of measurement, there are some key differences. It collects both website and app data to better understand the user journey. It uses events-based data instead of session-based. It includes privacy controls, such as cookieless measurement, as well as behavior and conversion modeling. It has prediction capabilities that offer guidance without complex models, and it has direct integrations to media platforms that help drive actions on your website or app. So with those features, GA4 will enable hoteliers to gain a better understanding of what data is available and how it can help them. In the past, hoteliers were forced to hand over the keys to their data to third parties, which limited their access to their own data, and it meant fewer choices when it came to which business intelligence tools and visualization apps they could use. So if you haven't already done so, now is the time to take ownership of your business's valuable data. Next slide, please, and back over to you, Luke.
Thanks, Gil. So what does this mean for you and your hotel's data? Gil started to touch on the breadth of changes that GA4 will be introducing into our worlds here. And that's a good place for us to start this conversation. With these fundamental changes in how Google is looking at data, thinking privacy first, etc., it's an opportunity for you to kind of evaluate three questions. Gil touched on one, which is the control of your data. Do you want to take control of your data? This is a good time in this transition to be asking that question and thinking about that. The second question is how I would phrase it, architecture and analytics architecture. And what I mean by that is, do you have or do you need a data warehouse to match and merge or handle all of the data that you're pulling in from UA and GA4? And then finally, what are some of the KPIs for your business that are going to be impacted or change because of the change in how Google is looking at its data? Gil had mentioned this previously, but the combination of web and app data as a single property is a good way to think about this. This is Google evolving and having a platform that was launched, in 2012 and saying, okay, web and app data is something new, and we need to combine them together to get a full story of your user's journey. So with those in mind and those fundamental differences in how data is being looked at, it's important to take stock of what this means for you and take away from this that there is no way to import your data directly from Universal Analytics into GA4. And that's a fairly fundamental change in a project that your organization needs to go through. With that in mind, we've included a few things for you to evaluate as you're thinking about what my plan needs to be. So taking a look at reports that you may have, or customization of views and what that looks like and how that will translate to your new reporting in GA4. Grace, next slide, please. So now that we've talked a little bit about what GA4 is and the impact that it will have on us, there are 4 steps that we can look at as we navigate this transition. First is creating a Google Analytics property and tagging your website. Second is updating your existing reports. Third is getting to know Google Analytics, and Gil will touch on this a little bit more in a minute, but for those of you familiar with UA and comfortable in that platform, it would be an understatement to say that GA4 is a radical change. So taking the time ahead of June 30th to familiarize yourself with the UX, the different terms, how the platform works, it's a good opportunity over the next 4 or so weeks to do that. And then finally, as we were talking about earlier, having a plan for archiving your historical UA data. Gil, can you take us through the GA4 property setup?
Sure, thank you. So for users upgrading from GA3, from Universal Analytics, the first step is to create a GA4 property. And if you currently use Universal Analytics, then you'll be able to use the GA4 Setup Assistant directly in the platform, which you can find in the admin section. And the GA4 Setup Assistant quickly guides you through the process of creating your GA4 property. But it's important to note that once created, the new GA4 property will not begin collecting data automatically. You need to set up a data stream and connect it to an on-page tag using Google Tag Manager. But thankfully, all of the instructions for this process can be found in the platform. And next slide, please. So for users that are new to Google Analytics, creating a GA account is also a quick and easy process. If you just go to the Google Analytics homepage, if you don't have a GA account, you will see a Get Started Today button beneath the welcome message. And clicking on that will start the setup process, and it will walk you through all the steps you need to create the property and connect it to a data stream. Next slide, please. Back over to you, Luke.
Sure. So once you've set up your GA4 property and done the appropriate tagging, your next step is likely to be your integration with your reporting dashboard. For many of you who are not just using straight reports from Google, but maybe using a different tool, this is another step in your process that you'll need to look into, where you're making sure that you're pointing your business intelligence tool or your reporting application at the correct source, which would be the new GA4 stream. Many of the platforms like Power BI have native connectors, right? So this can be a fairly streamlined process. And then your alternative or another option here is if you're working with an agency like Sendime, right, where we're using a data warehouse, we're using BigQuery and hooking those up to our reporting platform directly. So a couple of approaches you can take from a reporting standpoint. One is you may have an in-house team that needs to update your reporting dashboard, or you might be working with an agency where you're asking them to action that update and integration with your reporting tool. Next slide, please, Grace. All right, and the last slide for the setup here is historical archiving. You know, as we previously mentioned, it's not an auto import from UA to GA4, so you'll need to have a plan in place or work with a team that has a plan in place. Before we get into one or two steps that you can take here, important to understand the context of this. You know, working backwards as a reminder, you'll lose access to your UA data in July of 2024. And what that really means is a business decision on whether you want to continue with that data and that continuity and be able to look at past trends or behaviors from UA, or if you're looking to start fresh. We'd recommend looking back and having that data archived as a way to look at year-over-year data, to look at trends, et cetera. So with that in mind, what does a plan look like? We would use an ELT, right, to extract the data from Google Analytics. And once it's extracted, we're bringing it into a data warehouse, BigQuery in our case. And what we're doing there is you know, for lack of a better word, a match and merge project here. And what I mean by that is taking the historical UA data and as close as we can, matching that up to new GA4 data as well. It will not be one for one, as Gil touched on some of the key differences here, but where we can bring over like for like and match that data, we're looking to do that in our data warehouse. And then the last step, as I just mentioned here, is to then update your reporting platform, your dashboard, with that access or that stream so that you're continuing to pipe in your data from your analytics provider. So with that in mind, I'll turn it over to Gil to wrap up with a few closing thoughts.
Thank you. Yeah, so because it's a big transition, but we wanted to leave you with kind of the three big takeaways or areas to focus on and get excited about. So first of all, you know, the more comfortable you are with the new version, the deeper you can dig into your analytics and find new insights. So thankfully, Google offers 5 Skillshop courses that, you know, can turn you into a power user pretty quickly. And the courses range from beginner to intermediate, and they're completely free. Next up, what Luke was just talking about with Google BigQuery. One of the most impactful changes with GA4 is the ability to work seamlessly with BigQuery, you know, which, as Luke mentioned, is a cloud data warehouse. And using that, it allows you to combine your new GA4 data with the archived GA3 data, creating one holistic data set, which you can then connect to your dashboards and visualizations and business intelligence tools. The integration is built in to GA4, So it makes it very easy to control your data storage. In the past, enterprise analytics applications required a sizable investment in infrastructure and training, and there were recurring costs. Also, as I mentioned, companies often needed to pass ownership of their data to a third party to manage it for them. But by combining BigQuery with the GA4 dataset, hoteliers now have a cost-effective solution that provides full ownership and unlimited access. And lastly, GA4 takes advantage of machine learning. So the platform will analyze your events and provide insights that may not be readily apparent to you and your team. So by automatically surfacing relevant customer insights across devices and platforms, GA4 essentially enhances your own professional instincts and expertise. As an example, GA4 will alert you to significant trends in your data so you don't miss any crucial insights. And the tool even will anticipate future actions, such as predicting revenues from groups of customers. And by leveraging events, you'll be able to deepen your understanding of your best guests based on their own individualized journeys. And that's a massive shift, but it's one that positions your hotel for modern marketing funnels that adapt in real time to today's omni-channel guest journeys. Next slide.
Perfect. So thank you both for sharing those expert insights. As we mentioned at the beginning, we have reserved some time for some Q&A. We have had some of the attendees submit some questions, which I will pose to Gil and Luke. And if there's anything that perhaps comes to mind after the session is concluded, don't hesitate to sort of get in touch, and we will identify the right person to sort of get back to you with an answer. So Luke, Gil, we've had 2 questions come through, it looks like. So the first one is, when should we anticipate dashboards to start reflecting GA4 data?
I'll take that, Gil.
Mm-hmm.
We're starting to look at dashboards reflecting GA4 data in July of this year. So as UA data stops processing, we're in the middle of updating our dashboards to reflect having that stream of GA4 data. So July of this year.
Another hotelier has said, I haven't yet started the process of transitioning over to Google Analytics 4. Do I still have time?
Good question. You do. I would immediately start with having your GA4 account set up and tagging your website with GA4 as an immediate first step. What you'll discover at that point in time is that you'll have a period here where GA4 is new and UA shuts off, where you'll have to look between the 2 platforms to do some of your comparison on year-over-year data, right? So a little bit more manual, but not entirely the end of the world. But your first immediate step here is to have GA4 set up.
Yeah, and I can add that like the time sensitive issue to think about is archiving the old data before it's no longer available. And it's something that you still have time to do. And it's something that using the tools that Luke mentioned, like an ETL platform, you can set it up to automatically archive all of that data for you. So it's something that can be set up relatively quickly, but that is something that is kind of time sensitive to keep in mind. Because just so that you have, complete historical records, and that down the line you don't have a gap in your data that would stop you from identifying any trends or making decisions.
Perfect. Thank you. Another question has come through that you may or may not have the answer to. So if not, we can circle back with an answer at a later time. But do you know approximately any costings around BigQuery, or if there's any sort of hidden costs to be utilizing that data warehouse?
I don't have an exact number for you, Gil. I don't know if you do either, but there is a, for lack of a better word, a storage fee or a transfer fee. I think Google makes a calculator relatively available for you. And it's done in such a way, and if it's set up correctly, it's relatively low cost, and there is a free tier. So if you're thinking of a single hotel with a single setup, you're likely in the free tier for BigQuery. And again, it's done on calculation of queries and storage overall.
Yeah, also, I don't have the exact specifics, but in general, BigQuery, I believe the pricing scales. So especially if you're comparing it to enterprise solutions in the past, BigQuery for most organizations tends to be more cost effective.
Okay, great. We've had a series of other questions come through with some individuals asking a few, so we can perhaps get back to them individually via email. But there's just another one that I thought might be relevant for the entire group on KPIs and reporting. So the question is, with a focus on user engagement instead of the usual web metrics, what sort of KPIs should hoteliers start to measure? Many have senior leaders expecting reports showing the health of their websites. What should the new reports look like?
Do you want to start there, Gil, or do you want me to jump in?
Yeah, there still are, KPIs to track, and, looking at conversions and things that are traditionally most important to stakeholders. But the key difference is getting to see the whole user journey that leads up to those events rather than just the conversion that takes place at the end.
Thanks, Gil. Yeah, so most KPIs, for example, conversion that Gil referenced, will still be, if not exactly the same, very similar, right? So you'll still see some of that if you're tracking revenue, for example. An example of where we're going to need to engage in a conversation and education is maybe around something like bounce rate. So bounce rate's going to change, and that metric's going to change. And candidly, it's changing because the technology around how we build websites or we build applications has changed. So Google no longer found the simple way of tracking bounce rate to be applicable anymore. And so they've layered in a few things, like if you're on the page for more than 10 seconds, right? That doesn't necessarily count against you in terms of bounce rate. So that's a decent example of where we'll see some KPIs changing, where the conversation will evolve from where it is today to where it will be in July and going forward.
Perfect. Thank you both. I think we've made it through the majority of the questions. There's a few outliers that, like I said, we will circle back to following the webinar. We'll have somebody from our team get in touch to resolve any outstanding queries. So that's all the time we have for today. Again, I want to give a special thank you to both Luke and Gil for coming and sharing their expertise. Also, a kind thank you to all of those who took time out of your day to dial in. If you'd like more information on how to excel in the age of next generation website analytics, please don't hesitate to get in touch. Feel free to visit send9.com or send us an email directly at info@send9.com. So thank you all again, and we look forward to connecting again soon. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.